I met him first, in 1929, through the intervention of a friend of mine, common friend, who asked Mr. Gandhi to see me. And so Mr. Gandhi wrote to me saying that he would like to see me. So I went and saw him. That was just before going to the Round Table Conference. And then he came to the second Round Table Conference. Didn't come for the first. And he was there for about 5-6 months. And there, of course, I met him also and faced him also. Then, once thereafter, he also, after the signing of the Pune Pact, asked me to come and see him. So I went to see him. He was then in jail. But that's all the time that I have met him. I always say that as I met Mr. Gandhi in the capacity of an opponent, I have a feeling that I know him better than most other people because he had opened his real fangs to me and I could see the inside of the man. You see, while others who generally went there as devotees saw nothing of him except the external appearance which he had put up as a Mahatma. But I saw him in his human capacity, the bare man in him. And so I say that I understand him better, you see, than most of the people who have associated themselves with him can say.
So how would you sum up what you found in him?
Well, I must say at the outset that I feel quite surprised, you see, at the interest which the outside world, Western world particularly, seems to be taking in Mr. Gandhi. I cannot understand that. So far as India is concerned, he was, in my judgment, an episode in the history of India, never an epoch maker. Gandhi has already vanished from the memory of the people in this country. His memory is kept up because the Congress party annually gives a holiday either on his birthday or some other day connected with some event in his life and has a celebration every year going on for 7 days in a week. Naturally, people's memory is revived. But if these artificial respirations were not given, I think Gandhi would be long, long forgotten.
You don't feel then that he fundamentally changed the aspects of
Not at all. Not at all. In fact, he was all the time double dealing. He conducted 2 papers, one in English, the Harijan, and before that, Young India. And in Gujarati, he conducted another paper, which is called the Deen Bandhu, or something like that. Now, if you read the 2 papers, you will see how Mr. Gandhi was deceiving the people. In the English paper, he posed himself as an opponent of the caste system and of untouchability, and that he was a Democrat. But if you read his Gujarati magazine, you will see him a more orthodox man. He has been supporting the caste system, the Varnashram Dharma, and all the orthodox dogmas, which have kept India down, all through ages. In fact, somebody ought to write Mr. Gandhi's biography by making a comparative study of the statements made by Mr. Gandhi in his Harijan and the statements made by Mr. Gandhi in this Gujarati paper. There are 7 volumes of it. You see. The people, the Western world only reads the English paper, where Mr. Gandhi, in order to keep himself in the esteem of the Western people who believe in democracy, was advocating democratic ideals. But you got to see also what he actually taught to the people in his vernacular paper. Nobody seems to have made any reference. All the biographies that have been written of him are based upon his Harijan and the Young India, but not upon the Gujarati writings of Mr. Gandhi.
Then what were his real intentions with regard to the scheduled castes in the structure?
Well, he only wanted, you see, there are 2 things about the scheduled caste. We want untouchability to be abolished, but we also want that we must be given equal opportunities so that we may rise to the level of the other classes. Mere washing off of untouchability is of no consequence. We have been carrying on with untouchability for the last 2,000 years. Nobody has bothered about it. Yes, there are some disabilities which are very harmful. For instance, people can't take water, and people can't have land, to cultivate and earn their livelihood. But the other things which are far more important, namely that they should have the same status in the country and that they should have the opportunity to hold high offices so that not only their dignity will rise, but also they will get what I call strategic positions from which they could protect their own people. Mr. Gandhi was totally opposed.
He was content with things like temple entry.
Temple entry, that was all the thing that he wanted to do. Nobody cares for Hindu temples now. The untouchables have become, so conscious of the fact The temple going is of no consequence at all. You live in the untouchable quarters, just the same, whether you went into the temple or whether you did not go into the temple. People, just as for instance, people at one time would not allow the untouchables to travel by railways because of pollution. But now they don't mind because the railways won't make any separate arrangement. But because they travel together in the train, it doesn't follow that their life in the villages vis-a-vis the Hindus has in any sense changed. Whenever the Hindu and the untouchable alights at a railway train, you see, they assume their old robes.
So you would say Gandhi was an orthodox Hindu?
Yes, he was absolutely an orthodox Hindu. You see, he was never a reformer. He has no dynamics in him. All this talk about untouchability was just for the purpose of making the untouchables drawn into the Congress. That was one thing. And secondly, you see, he wanted that the untouchables should not oppose his movement, you see, of Swaraj. I don't think beyond that he had any real motive of uplift.
And then do you think that political independence would have come without Gandhi?
Oh yes, I am sure about it. It might have been in slow degrees. But I personally myself think that if Swaraj had come in slow degrees in India, it would have profited the people better. For each community or each group, you see, which is suffering from many of these disabilities, would have been able to consolidate itself at each stage of the transfer of power from the British. Today, the whole thing came as a flood. People were unprepared. And I always think that the Labour Party has been the most stupid party in England.
Was it Gandhi who was too impatient, or the Congress Party? Was he?
No, personally, I do not know how suddenly Mr. Attlee agreed, you see, to give independence. That's a matter of secret which Mr. Attlee one day, I think, will disclose in his autobiography. How he came to do that, you see, because nobody ever expected. It is such a sudden change of front. Nobody ever expected. It seems to me, from the analysis that I make about it, there are two things which I think led, you see, to the Labour Party to take this decision. One is the national army that was raised by Subhash Chandra Bose. The British had been ruling this country in the firm belief that whatever may happen, you see, in this country, and whatever the politician may do, they will never be able to change the loyalty of the soldier. That was the one prop on which they were carrying on their administration. Now that thing was completely dashed to pieces. You see, when they found that even the soldier was being seduced and to form a party or a battalion to blow off the British. Then I think the British came to the conclusion that if they were to rule India, the only basis on which they could rule was the maintenance of the British army. Going back to the year 1857, when the Indian soldier rebelled against the East India Company. And they found that it would never be possible for the British to supply India with enough European troops to keep their hold on it. You see? Secondly, I myself think, I have no evidence, but I think the British soldier wanted the disbandment of the army immediately, so that they wanted to go to their civil jobs. You know how much indignation there was at this gradual disbandment of the army, because those who were not disbanded felt that those who were disbanded were going to take their jobs. What's going to happen to them? You see? Therefore, they could not think of having enough of a British army to keep India down. And besides, they had thought, I think, thirdly, that after all, what they gained from India was commerce, and not so much civil servant salary or the army income. They were small things, and they had better be sacrificed for the sake of keeping something which was much more profitable, namely trade and commerce. Because whether India remained independent or India became, accepted dominion status or something lesser than that, the trade and commerce would go on just the same. I think, personally myself, I have no authority for that, but that is the way the mind of the Labour Party turned.
Now, casting your mind back to the attack, the Yoravda attack,
yes.
Can you remember a little of what Gandhi said to you and what you said to him?
Oh, I know it very well. You see, the British government had, in the original award which MacDonald had given, had accepted my suggestion. I said, look here, the Hindus want that there should be a common electorate, so that there will be no separatist feeling between the scheduled caste and the Hindus. We think that if you have a common electorate, we would be submerged and the nominees of the scheduled caste who would be elected, who would be really slaves of the Hindus, not independent people. Now, I told Mr. Ramsay MacDonald that this is a sort of a thing that he might do. Give us a separate electorate and also give us a second vote in the general election, so that Gandhi cannot say that we are separated in point of election. First of all, my contention was this, that for 5 years we lived separately from the Hindus with no kind of intercourse or intercommunication, you see, of a social or a spiritual sort. What can one day's cycle of participation in a common electorate do to remove this hardened crust of separatism which has grown for centuries? It's a foolish thing to think that if two people vote together in a common polling booth, that their hearts are going to change. Nothing of the kind. Mr. Gandhi has got this madness in him. Well, let this be satisfied by this kind of a system. Give the untouchables 2 votes and give them a population representation of ratio, so that the weightage would be in terms of votes, not in terms of representatives, so that the Gandhi and others may not complain. That Ramsay MacDonald accepted. You see, the award was really my suggestion. I wrote to him a letter from Naples that this is what I would like him to do, you see, so that there may be no trouble. This is exactly what he did. You see, gave us a separate electorate and also a vote in the general electorate. But Gandhi didn't want that we should send our 2 representatives. Therefore, he didn't want the separate electorate part of the award, and went on fast. Then they all came to me. They said, well, the British government said, if he agrees, you see, to abandon the award, then we have no objection. But we can't abandon the award ourselves. We have given the award, we have taken all things into consideration, and we think this is the best system. You ought to read Ramsay MacDonald's letter. It's a very clear statement that we haven't done anything to aggravate the separation. In fact, we are trying to bridge it up by bringing the 2 sections together in a common electoral roll. But Gandhi's object was that we should not get, you see, free independent representation. Therefore, in the first place, he said, no representation ought to be given to us. That's how his stand in the Round Table Conference. He said, I recognize only 3 communities. You see, namely Hindus, Muslims and Sikhs. These are the only 3 communities that will have a political recognition in the constitution. But the Christians or the Anglo-Indians or the scheduled caste will have no place in the constitution. They must merge themselves in the general community. That was the stand that he had taken. Well, all his friends, I know, you see, were asking him how foolish was his attitude. His own friends had quarreled with him on this subject, that if you are prepared to give, you see, special representation to the Sikhs and special representation to the Muslims, who are 1,000 times superior in strength, you see, and political and economic stamina, how can you deny it to the scheduled caste or to the Christians? He always used to say, oh, you don't understand our problem. That's all he was saying. Alexander even, who was a great friend of his, had a serious quarrel with him, as he told me. Then that French woman who was his disciple, I forget her name now, she also had a great quarrel with him. That we don't understand this attitude. Either you say, we won't give anything to anybody. Let there be just a common role. You see, then we can understand that that's a democratic thing. But to go on saying that you will give it to the Muslims and you give it to the Sikhs, you see, but not to the scheduled caste, seems absurd. He could give no answer. So we suggested this method. He also didn't, in the beginning when he wrote, he said, no, the scheduled caste should have nothing, no representation. Then his own friend said to him, this was asking for too much. You see, nobody would support you in this matter. Then Malviya and others came to me and said, well, could you not help us to solve this problem? I said, well, I don't want to solve this problem by sacrificing what we have been able to get from the British Prince.
So you went to Pune?
As I said, I suggested alternative formula. And that formula was that I am not prepared to give up the separate electorate, but I am prepared, you see, to modify the thing. You see, in this way, namely, that the candidates who would stand in the final election on behalf of the scheduled caste should be first elected by the scheduled caste themselves, sort of a primary election, and that they should elect 4 people, 4. And the 4 then should stand in the general electorate. And let the best one come, so that we get some assurance that you don't put up your own nominees, but that we do get people who will express our voice in the parliament. That Mr. Gandhi had to accept, so he accepted that. Of course, we had the benefit of it only in one election in 1937. You see, there you will see that the federation swept the poll. Gandhi was not able to get a single candidate of his party elected.
Well, did he bargain very hard at the end of his fast?
Oh, of course, he bargained and bargained. I said nothing doing. You see, I am prepared to save your life. You see, provided you do not make hard terms. But I am not going to save your life at the cost of the life of my people. Yes, this is too much. How much I have labored, you see, in all this, I know very well. And I am not going to sacrifice your whim, sacrifice our people's interest, just for the sake of satisfying. Yours is a whim. How can one day's common election alter the situation? Simply cannot alter the situation.
So what did he say to that?
He couldn't say anything. You see, he couldn't say anything. He was very much afraid, you see, that the scheduled caste would be a sort of as independent a body as the Sikhs and the Muslims were. And that the Hindus would be left alone to fight a battle against the combination of these three sections. That was what was at the back of his mind. And he didn't want the Hindus to be left without any allies.
So really he worked entirely as a politician.
As a politician. He was never a Mahatma, and I refuse to call him Mahatma. You see, I've never in my life called him Mahatma. He doesn't deserve that title, not even from the point of view of his morality. You see.